What's going on, guys? Welcome back to our GCSE psychology journey, and in this video we're going to be looking at early brain development. Let's go. So let's start off by looking at the brain. So the human brain develops in a sequence from simple to complex structures, and this development begins in the womb and continues through early childhood and beyond. Understanding this progression helps explain how basic bodily functions, sensory experiences, movement, and thinking skills emerge over time. So what are some of the key periods of brain development? Well, there's the prenatal period, which is from conception to birth. Infancy and early childhood, which is birth to 5 years. Adolescence, between puberty and early adulthood. So the brain isn't fully developed at birth. It undergoes significant growth and reorganization during childhood and adolescence. Key brain structures and their developmental roles. So we have the brainstem. The function of the brainstem is that it controls autonomic involuntary functions like our heart beating, breathing, and digestion. The development of this is that it forms early in the womb and is functional at birth. How important is our brainstem? Well, it keeps the baby alive by managing essential survival functions. The thalamus. We can see it here on the right at the top. So the function of the thalamus is that it acts as a relay station for sensory information, so things such as sight, sound, touch. It develops soon after the brainstem does. The importance of it is that it prepares the brain to start processing sensory input from the environment. The cerebellum, or mini brain. The function of the cerebellum is that it coordinates movement and balance, and it grows rapidly during late pregnancy and infancy. The importance of the cerebellum is that it coordinates sensory information with motor activity. This is known as the sensory motor. The cerebral cortex. So when we think of the brain, we think of that wrinkly structure. That is the cerebral cortex, or the cortex. So the function of the cortex is roughly 3 millimeters thick and is found in all mammals. The word cortex means cover, and it's involved in higher level thinking, problem solving, language, and memory. This matures over a long period into adolescence and even early adulthood. The importance of the cerebral cortex is that it enables complex thought, learning, social understanding, and self-regulation. Stages of brain development. So we start off with the neural tube, so from roughly 3 weeks. So the brain and spinal cord begin as a flat sheet of cells called the neural plate. This folds and fuses to form the neural tube. The front part becomes the brain and the back part becomes the spinal cord. A key event is the closure of the neural tube, and problems here can lead to neural tube defects, things such as spina bifida. So after say 5 weeks, the main vesicles begin to form. So these are kind of like 5 swellings of the neural tube, and they then grow. Each is followed by the suffix of encephalon. So this is the telencephalon, and this becomes the cerebral hemispheres, or the cortex that we saw earlier, becomes the basal ganglia, the olfactory bulb. And the functions, well, they involve thinking, memory, reasoning, voluntary movement, and sensory processing. So that's the top one that we can see there, the telencephalon. The second one down is the diencephalon, and this becomes the thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus, or the pineal gland. The functions is that it acts as the sensory relay. It also helps to bring our body back to homeostasis, regulates hormones, body temperature, hunger, thirst. So it's a very important part of our neural anatomy. The third down, we have the mesencephalon, or the midbrain, and this becomes the tectum and the tegmentum. The functions include visual and auditory reflexes, eye movement, and motor control. The fourth down, we have the metencephalon, and this becomes the pons and the cerebellum. They coordinate balance, movement, and communication between brain regions. And the fifth down, we have the myencephalon, and this becomes the medulla oblongata, and this is vital for autonomic functions, things such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. So myelination starts from around 14 weeks of gestation. The development of the myelin sheath around the neurons, which help improve the speed of information processing. And if you guys go back to neural structure and function, then you can see exactly what the myelin sheath does. Apoptosis, or programmed cell death. So the pruning of neurons that are not used help to fine-tune the brain's networks. Postnatal brain development. Synaptogenesis and pruning from birth to 2 years. So during this period, synaptic density increases, followed by pruning to refine those connections. Myelination continues through childhood and adolescence, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. Genetic and environmental influences. Nature, genetics, where these provide the basic blueprint for brain structure and potential, and they determine the sequence and timing of brain development. Nurture or environment. The environment can influence how the brain adapts and grows through experiences. Enriched environments, responsive caregiving, and stimulation can strengthen brain connections, whereas trauma, neglect, or lack of stimulation can impair brain development. Genetics. Now, genetic factors influence brain structure, neurodevelopmental disorders, and overall cognitive abilities. Heritability studies. Twin and adoption studies show the genetic basis of intelligence and other traits. Environmental factors. Nutrition. Malnutrition during pregnancy or early childhood can affect brain development. Toxins. Now, exposure to alcohol, drugs, or pollutants can harm the developing brain and can lead to things such as fetal alcohol syndrome. Enrichment and experience. As we mentioned earlier, stimulating environments promote synaptogenesis, while deprivation can lead to delays. Things such as stress and trauma. Early exposure to stress can affect brain areas like the amygdala and hippocampus, impacting emotional regulation in later life. Neuroplasticity. What is neuroplasticity? Well, it's the brain's ability to change and adapt in response to experiences. Some brain areas are more plastic during early development, for example, things such as vision, but others, for example, the prefrontal cortex, retain plasticity into adulthood. Alright guys, hopefully that gives you a better understanding of early brain development. And we went into a little more detail than is normally covered in the curriculum, but I feel like as though it's always nice to know about how our brain develops. Rewind, make notes, pause where you need to pause. Make sure that you guys stay tuned for the next one and check out the rest of the videos in the series, and I'll catch you guys in the follow-up. Peace.